Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HDM here with an updated Magicka Warden build for the Blackwood chapter in ESO. This is going to be our unkillable solo Magicka Warden based around block casting and frost damage with absolutely insane survivability, damage reduction, shields, massive self-healing. And yeah, it doesn't get much easier than this. Of course, we'll go over everything you need to make this work, including gear sets, skills, champion points, companions, and much, much more. So let's get started. All right, everybody, we are back on the solo Magicka Warden, this time with an update for the ATRONACH build, one of my favorite Magicka Warden builds. So let's jump right into it. Checking out the buff stats on this solo setup. About 40k max Magicka, 30k max health, and 21k max stamina. 2,500 Magicka recoveries looking good, 3,000 spell damage. Of course, that does go up with our back bar glyph. And about 28,000 spell resists, 26,000 physical resist. Of course, we got 64 points into max Magicka, being the Magicka Warden. Buff food on this setup, anything with all three resources. So I like Bewitched Sugar Skulls. Gives you max health, max stamina, max Magicka, and a good bit of health recovery. Fairly easy to pick this up on Guild Traders as well. So that would be my number one option there. In terms of the Mundus Stone, I have changed this a little bit. The ATRONACH Mundus is going to be quite nice on this setup, letting you sustain all of your Magicka abilities. And then, of course, we have some more buffs here passively, Minor Berserk, Major Prophecy. We'll talk about where all of those come from in just a minute. Now, in terms of the race on this build, went with Nord for this setup. Nord is just a nice solo tanky setup. You have the rugged passive, you know, the extra physical and spell resistance. You have the extra stamina, which is going to help with the blocking for this build, as well as the extra ultimate generation. And extra health is not bad too. So pretty good race for solo builds in my opinion. I would say another really strong option, especially if you're a newer player that might struggle a bit with sustain, check out the Breton for the extra cost reduction to your Magicka abilities. Also, Imperial has a nice cost reduction bonus to all abilities, including ultimates. So that's going to be very nice on the setup as well. And then in terms of consumables, I think if you can get Tri-Stat Potions, that's probably going to be the best just for your overall sustain, since we are doing a bit of blocking, quite a bit of casting as well. If you don't have that, if you don't want to spend the gold, then just basic Magicka Potions should get the job done fairly well. But that is the basic setup, so I think we can jump into the gear next. So going to be running the Frozen Watcher set. This is a very nice heavy armor set. Gives you stamina, health, stamina again, and when you block, you summon a Blizzard, dealing frost damage every second, AoE frost damage. It also has a nice chance of inflicting the chilled status effect on enemies. If you've never seen this in action, just simply blocking here on the setup, it's going to create that nice Blizzard effect. And like we said, that's going to do frost damage, as well as you have that increased damage mitigation since you are blocking with a one-handed shield. So this build is extremely tanky and doing damage at the same time, which is pretty cool. Of course, this is a heavy armor set, so we're going to want to run this on the body. You can choose to run this on the weapons and jewelry if you like. It's going to take longer to farm since this is a dungeon set. But I would say body pieces, 5 pieces on the body is going to be ideal. You could even run this build as a tank setup if you want, because very high health and very good damage mitigation coming with heavy armor. So we've got the heavy chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet. In terms of traits, we're mixing in divines with some sturdy. I felt like at least 3 to 4 sturdy pieces would be helpful in terms of maintaining your block as long as possible. You do want to try to perma-block if you can to keep this proc going as much as possible. So that's the first set. Hasn't really changed since the last iteration of this build. 5 pieces of Frozen Watcher. Then for our second 5-piece set, we're actually going to run something specifically on the back bar, and that is going to be the Winter's Respite set. This is a very cool frost-themed set as well. You get Magicka Recovery, Max Magicka. And then when we're on our back bar, we get even more max Magicka, and then casting abilities on the ground. So basically ground effect AoEs, put a Circle of Healing Frost on the ground as well. Heals you and your group for about 4,000 health every 2 seconds. Now, we've decided to run this on the back bar because it's just It's going to let us run some more interesting things on the front bar. So the back bar ice staff, and then 3 pieces of jewelry to make this work. So the amulet, and then 2 rings. In terms of your enchantments here, you can really play around with this. I wanted extra recovery on this setup. So 2 Magicka recovery and 1 spell damage, I think, is a nice mix there. And then in terms of the back bar staff, infused, of course, with a spell damage enchant, since we will be running Wall of Elements, or Unstable Wall on the back bar, I should say, for that extra spell damage. Is going to be really nice. Now, if you haven't seen what that looks like, that set will proc off of any AoE damage. So you can see there, getting the extra healing coming in. And then, of course, we have extra frost damage if we block. So that is what that looks like. Now, obviously, since we're just proccing that on the back bar, that completely frees up your front bar weapon slots. I've chosen to run the willpower set just to get some bonus max magicka on the front bar. That's going to let all of our abilities do more damage when we're on the front bar. So a willpower weapon, doesn't matter what it is, dagger, sword, axe, doesn't make a difference. And then a willpower shield, ideally sturdy, though divines would be okay as well, with the max magicka enchant. So you're getting a lot of extra magicka just running this 2-piece set on the front bar, probably close to 3.5k. So that is going to be a nice, easy option. Of course, you can run some of the arena one-handed shield weapons if you want. Those are always an option as well. But that just leaves us with our monster set, which is still going to be the Ice Heart set on this. We get the spell damage, we get the damage shield, and the extra frost damage every second. Whenever we deal critical damage, we have tons of damage over time effects, which can hit multiple enemies. So all you need is 1 crit strike, and that will proc the Ice Heart set. So it should be pretty easy to have a decent uptime on this. Now, in terms of the weights for the monster set, ideally you'd want some light pieces here. So a light helmet and a light shoulders. That will let you take advantage of your Undaunted passives, plus some extra light armor, cost reduction and penetration. That's going to be really good as well. So that is the setup. We've got 5 Frozen Watcher on the body. We've got the Winter set jewelry and the back bar ice staff. Front bar, you've got 2 pieces of willpower, and then the monster set Ice Heart. And if you'd like to see some alternate gear set options, I will have those in the written guide. There are several other sets that you can use if you want more damage, for example, on this setup, with maybe less of a focus on survivability. So I'll have a link for that in the description. Make sure to check that out if you're interested. But with that said, let's move on to the skills here. And starting with our front bar, which is our one-handed shield, we've got Arctic Blast. This is a nice little burst heal, plus a heal over time and decent frost damage and a stun. So enemies hit by this effect 3 times get a 4-second stun. So this is what it looks like. You can see you get the nice heal up front when you cast that, and then the heal over time afterwards. Pretty decent. I mean, if you combine this with your Winters set on the back bar, you'll have pretty decent heals coming in. So you don't really have to worry about healing at all, I find, on this build, except if you're fighting really, really difficult content, then you might need to throw in an extra heal, which we'll talk about. By the way, Arctic Blast comes from the Winter's Embrace skill line. That's our 3rd ability there, and you do want Arctic Blast for that morph. Second ability is going to be Deep Fissure. That's our Animal Companion skill line, second ability here. Does decent damage, but also applies Major Breach to enemies in front of us, so they're going to take even more damage from all of our dots and AoEs and things like that. So this is very good, fairly cheap to cast. So you'll want to cast this a few times on your front bar just to maintain that debuff. Third ability is another Animal Companion skill that's called Bird of Prey. The last ability here in the skill line. This gives you some extra movement speed plus passive Minor Berserk. Now, honestly, you're not getting a ton of damage from this since you are heavy armor setup. So you can, for more difficult content, replace this with maybe another front bar heal. I personally like Living Trellis. Each time you take damage with this ability on, you're going to get healed back. And plus, you can actually spam it if you want to get some extra heals happening like that. So when you combine that with the healing over time, with Winters on the back bar, you can see you got a lot of healing potential on the setup. So that's what I would flex in there if you need a little bit of extra healing. But if not, Bird of Prey for a little bit of extra damage is good too. Next ability, we've got Defensive Stance. This comes from the One-Handed Shield skill line, 3rd ability here. And just some passive bonuses here while slotted. You can see when you have a shield equipped, The amount of damage you can block is increased by 10%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by another 10%. So ideally on the setup, we want to block as much as possible just to keep up our sets and our damage mitigation. So this is going to just help that happen a little bit longer with that passive buff there. And speaking of passive buffs, another easy buff to have on your front bar is going to be Inner Light from the Mages Guild. It's the first ability here. We get some passive max Magicka, which we're able to stack pretty high on this Warden build with the bonus spell critical buff. This is nice because it allows us to be a little bit more flexible with our potion. And then yet another passive ability here is what I'd recommend for your front bar ultimate. We won't be casting this really at all. This is simply for the passives that we can get from it. So from the support skill line, Reviving Barrier, you can get a nice damage shield and a heal from this. But in the support passives, you can see Magicka Aid gives you an extra 10% Magicka recovery just for having that ability slotted. So pretty cool, just passive buff there on our front bar. And switching to the back bar, which is our Ice Staff. This is where most of our damage comes from. So we've got Unstable Wall of Frost. That comes from the Destruction Staff skill line. Second ability here. Now you can choose either morph. Unstable Wall of Frost will give you a little bit more damage, though it does have a 10-second duration. So you'll need to stay on top of that a little bit more and make sure you cast that as soon as it goes back down. With the Frost Staff equipped, we also get a nice damage shield of extra there on top of that. So that's pretty cool. Combined with that, we have Fetcher Infection from the Animal Companion skill line. This is a nice damage over time. It also lasts 10 seconds. It does increased damage if you cast this twice, and then you also apply Minor Vulnerability for the duration, increasing your enemy's damage taken by 5%. So nice damage over time and a nice debuff on top of that. And then, of course, we have Winter's Revenge, which comes from Winter's Embrace. This is another ice damage over time AoE effect. Very nice frost damage. This one lasts 12 seconds. It also reduces movement speed in the area and has a chance to apply shield. So good shield uptime on this build as well. Then we just have our two buffs here, Bull Netch and Ice Fortress. Now, Bull Netch is a little bit unusual for a Magicka Warden. Usually they'd run the Blue Betty skill, but the reason why I'm running Bull Netch for the more tanky setup here is you do get stamina recovery from this instead of Magicka recovery. And the reason why that's helpful on this type of setup is this will help you get some stamina back while you are blocking, especially on the front bar. So when you block on the front bar, you will be draining stamina. Basically, the more damage you take, the more your stamina will drain. But the Bull Netch skill is going to give you a little bit of stamina back, helping you just block for longer and maintain your block as long as possible. So that's a really nice option. That's why the perma-block build on the Warden is probably one of the easiest classes to maintain that kind of playstyle thanks to this buff. So I definitely recommend that. Make sure you switch it over to Bull Netch if you're using the Magicka Morph currently. And then just our armor buff, Ice Fortress, one of the best defensive buffs in the game, really, because you get that Major Resolve buff, which is about 6,000 armor, plus minor protection on top of that, so more damage reduction. Even more is nice. Then, of course, our ultimate here, Northern Storm, does really nice AoE frost damage and increases our max Magicka by 15% for 30 seconds. We also get major protection, helping us take a lot more damage during that duration. So 15% max Magicka for 30 seconds is a really nice buff. That equals about 7,000 total max Magicka added on top of what we already have. So you'll definitely want to save up for this one. You want to cast this as often as possible. But that is the basic setup. So we'll go ahead and do a little demo here of the rotation. It's really very simple. So in terms of buffs, you just have the two back bar buffs. You've got the Netch and the armor buff, and that is it. And then in the front bar, you'll just be casting your Deep Fissure for damage. You can also cast your heal if you need it, and then the 3 back bar buffs. So we'll go ahead and start here on the back bar. Open with Deep Fissure, cast those 3 dots, and then just block and alternate Deep Fissure. You can throw in a couple light or heavy attacks in between if you want. Use your potion when that's ready, and then go to the back bar, recast your dots, recast your buffs. If your ultimate's up, might as well cast that as well. And remember to maintain block. As long as you're maintaining block, you have damage for free, which is really nice on this setup. So my dots are down. I'll go ahead and put those back up. Back to the front bar, block and Deep Fissure. So I'm block casting. If you didn't notice, you can block and cast Deep Fissure at the same time. I'll go ahead and cast a heal here. I'm not really losing much health, but just to show you how that would look. If you have extra ultimate, you might as well cast the heal, does damage as well at the same time. Getting another ult here pretty soon. Should be enough to finish this off. I'll go ahead and cast the ult. Make sure I maintain my buffs. Got one boss down, one to go. Yeah, you can see I didn't really take much damage at all. There you go. Very easy. All right, what passives do you need in order to make this work? Under Animal Companions, these are quite strong. Bond with Nature, you will want. You actually get a little heal from using your abilities. Savage Beast as well gives you ultimate back. Flourish is very good. This buffs all of your recovery. And then Advanced Species gives you a little bit extra damage on the front and back bar. So all of those I would take. Green Balance, you won't get quite as much benefit from these unless you're running Living Trellis like I showed you. But the one that you should get regardless is Maturation. This gives you 10% bonus max health for 20 seconds as long as you cast a heal. And that works off of any heal. So like my Winter's heal over here actually does proc that ability, even though that does proc the same buff, even though it's from a different skill line. Any heal will make that work. And then from Winter's Embrace, we will get some nice benefit here. For example, Frozen Armor, extra armor there. Reduce the effectiveness of snares, sure, why not? And then you definitely want Piercing Cold because most of our damage is either magic damage or frost damage. Under passives, we do have 2 weapon skill lines that we're using here. So One-Handed Shield, yes, you definitely want all of these for the extra cost reduction, extra movement speed, all of that is good stuff. And then Destruction Staff, yes, you'll want all of your Destro Staff passives as well. And then in terms of the armor passives, we're actually using 2 armor types. So light armor, you do get some good bonuses here, even with only 2 pieces of light. Like you get the reduced cost of sprint, you get extra magic recovery and magicka cost reduction. You also get a little bit of spell critical and spell penetration, which is really pretty nice bonus for only 2 pieces of light. But what you will get most of is your heavy armor passives, right? So we've got extra armor, extra recoveries, extra max health, extra heavy attack sustain, which is good. Don't forget to heavy attack. And then extra healing received. Now, in terms of guild skills, yes, we do have some guild abilities here. For example, Inner Light. You can get some extra magicka and magicka recovery from the magicka controller passive. That's a good one. Undaunted, you will want that for a little bit of extra max stats here, 4% on this setup. We talked about the support passive here for Reviving Barrier. If you're choosing to run this as a passive ultimate, then definitely put in 2 points to Magicka Aid. 10% bonus magicka recovery really helps on this build. And of course, your racial passives and alchemy medicinal use, just to make those potions last as long as possible. All right, let's talk about champion points next. How has this changed for the Blackwood chapter? Not a lot of huge changes. The green tree for Blackwood has basically stayed the same. So I'm using a very generic kind of setup for this. I do recommend always put points into Steed's Blessing for the movement speed. Always put points into Gilded Fingers for the extra gold. And then usually I'll work my way up here to Steadfast Enchantment. This does make your enchants last a little bit longer. So this is nice, like quality of life. Treasure Hunter as well gives you better quality of items and treasure chests. Then Rationer does make your food last longer. And then Liquid Efficiency does give you a chance not to consume a potion. So those are what I would recommend, just what I tend to use most in the green tree. Now, by the way, if you'd like to see more loadouts for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points specifically, I do have those listed in the written guide. Moving on to the blue tree, let's start in the middle here with Precision. 20 points there will let you move into Extended Might. 20 points into Piercing. You can come back and fill these out later. Flawless, Ritual, and War Mage. The main thing you want is your damage stars at that point, your slotted stars. So Biting Aura, very good on a Warden since we have a lot of AoE damage. Your Deep Fissure, your Ultimate, your Back Bar, AoEs. You get a lot of good benefit from Binding Aura, as well as Thaumaturge, 50 points into here because we do have a lot of damage over time effects. From there, the other two, I do like Arcane Supremacy since we have so much Magicka on this build. It does help just to kind of stack that a little bit more. And then for my last slotted star, I did Wrathful Strikes, just a little bit of extra spell damage, a little bit of extra damage overall. You could also do Fighting Finesse, extra critical damage and critical healing would be pretty good on this setup as well, especially maybe if you swapped in like the Thief Mundus. From there, if you have more points to spend, what I usually do is work my way down through Eldritch Insight into Staving Death, and you can get some pretty good defensive passives here. Definitely quick recovery for the extra healing taken, and then right away into Preparation. This only has 2 stages now. It used to be 4, but for those 2 stages, you now get 10% damage reduction, which is actually pretty strong. And then you can get the extra magical damage reduction and physical attack reduction. That's what I'd recommend for your passive defense there. And then finally, the red tree. I would start with your recovery here, Rejuvenation. Maybe add in Boundless Vitality really quick to get some extra max health. Ironclad's pretty good. Get some extra armor there passively. Those are your 3 slotted stars that you can actually start with. And then for the 4th one, I would recommend working your way up through Sprinter, Hasty, Hero's Vigor, and then eventually get to Siphoning Spells. So this will be really excellent, you guys, when you're clearing your way through a dungeon or farming experience, champion points, whatever. You'll get tons of resource sustain from that. I definitely would recommend that as your last slotted star. And then everything else is passive. If you have more points, come over here to kind of your defense and block related passives. This will be really helpful on this build. Tireless Guardian for the extra block cost reduction. Nimble Protector lets you move quicker while blocking. And then Fortification is also very good. Increases the amount of damage you can block. So those are kind of all block related. Those will be very useful on this build. I would also recommend some points into Tumbling and then Defiance for the reduced cost of Break Free. In terms of companions for the solo unkillable build, this is a little bit lower on the DPS end, so getting some extra DPS from your companion, probably the best way to go. We don't really need tanking. We're super tanky on this build. The healing is decent as well, so focusing on a damage companion can actually be a nice benefit. So I have chosen Miri here with a bow. This is going to be the Deadshot build that I have up on my site for companions. And Miri works really well with a bow because her ultimate ability is actually sort of like a bow skill as well, and she does really good as a ranged DPS. You can also throw in some extra healing, some different heal over time options with Miri as well if you want to supplement. If you want to supplement your healing just a little bit more for difficult content, it's a nice addition to the build actually. So the way that works in terms of gear, like we said, put the bow on Miri, that'll keep her at range. Medium armor, as many pieces as you can get. And then a combination of traits, I would say quickened for the cooldown reduction, some aggressive traits for damage, and then some vigorous for health. For abilities, I did throw in a heal, reverse entropy, followed by piercing arrow, Viper's Bite, which are 2 bow abilities, sniping silver, which is another ranged DPS skill, and then vanish is a nice emergency heal that actually lets her avoid damage and heal to full health. I'll have the full build for Miri in the written guide for this build, so make sure you check that out if you have any questions. Last but not least, if you're curious about the outfit style, actually it's not an outfit style. This is just the armor style that these gear sets come in. So the Frozen Watcher set has this look. I thought it looked really good on this setup and kind of matches the look of Iceheart, which has a unique look, very unique set. I just matched the colors the best I could, and that is it. All right, everybody, and with that, that's going to wrap up our updates to the solo unkillable Magicka Warden build for the Blackwood chapter and beyond. Of course, if you enjoyed the video or you found it informative, don't forget to crush that like button and make sure you're subscribed right here for many more ESO builds just like this one. Now, if you have any more questions, make sure to check out the written guide. Link is going to be down in the description and the pinned comment for that. I will have alternate gear set options if you need them, as well as alternate skills. We'll have the Miri companion build and then CP breakdowns for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points. So Lots of good info there as well. Make sure you check it out. Finally, big shout out, big thank you to our channel members here who go out of their way each and every month to support the channel. Thank you all so much. If you are interested in becoming a member, we do have some great perks, including early access to videos and some pretty unique members-only builds and guides. So if that sounds interesting to you, just click on that join button for more information. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.